CFO of Pantaleon and has a lot of experience implementing stuff in Web3. So welcome everybody. This is great to have you here. Welcome to the story we want to tell about the evolution of the internet. Much gratitude to our distinguished panel. Thanks for sharing with all of us today. Web3, the early internet, was primarily read-only, a digital library where users consumed content passively. Web 2 transformed the internet into a read and write platform, giving birth to social media, blogs, and other user-generated content. This allowed users not only to consume, but to create and share. Now, we are transitioning to Web 3. Users are not just consumers or creators, they are true owners of their property. And that is something to be really excited about. So I want to start off with a question to Jeff. Why is Web3 important for the future of humanity?
I don't have a fucking clue, but I'll give you this. There's an opportunity that we have change in front of us. And like anytime there's a systemic change, there's ideas, opportunities. And in case of the world we're living in today, we lost trust. And to the extent that the adoption of Web3 brings trust back into our lives, whether it's your digital life, your online life, where we can actually trust people by having a trustless system that gains notoriety and popularity, that could have a tremendous effect for the future. But really, it's up to everyone to figure out for themselves how this technology is used or if it's used. But I do have good hopes and great hopes that sometime in the future, at the core, what we know as Web3 doesn't have to be called Web3. It's just stuff that changes and stuff that works. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. Lorenzo, Web3 has been called the Internet of Money and Property Rights. What does that mean to you?
Well, so it's a good definition of Web3. Clearly, it doesn't cover all of the aspects of Web3, but the component that is specifically focused on property is key to understand one of the capabilities. So what is property, right? What does it mean that, to own something? Like I own this watch or I own money, right? It's my property. It means that I have access to it. I can use it, I can spend it, I can burn it, I can do whatever I want. If it's money, for example, it could be a gold bar, it could be a dollar bill, right? And the thing is that if I want to transfer that property, it's easy to understand in the physical world, right? I just give it to you, and now it's your property. Now you can use it, and you can spend it, you can burn it, right? So that is a very easy concept. But when we digitalize things, in reality, we're not digitalizing the property, or at least in Web2, we're not digitalizing the property. So let me tell you why. If I want to transfer money digitally, what do? I pull out my cell phone, I check my bank account, I look at my balance, and I say, okay, I want to transfer this. I want to transfer this money, right, to Juanma, for example. The problem is that that number on my balance on my screen is not actually my property. It's a visualization of my property. It represents my property. It's like a receipt, if you want. It means that if I go to a bank and I want to withdraw my money, in theory, right, I should be able to do that. But that's not my money. It's a representation. It's access to my money. So when I transfer that to you, I transfer information, I transfer data, I transfer a number that will eventually allow you to go to your bank and withdraw that money. So I'm transferring the access to the property, but not the asset itself. That is basically saying the internet allows us to send data, right? The blockchain allows us to send property. If I have a Bitcoin in my digital wallet, that is the asset. It's a digital asset, it's a piece of code, but that's the asset. And when I transfer a Bitcoin from my digital wallet to your digital wallet, you actually receive the asset, and at the point you can do whatever you want. You don't have to ask permission, you don't have to go to a bank and see can I withdraw it. No, you have to wait until Monday. Well, the manager is not here. Well, you had to answer 33,000 different questions, right? It's your property. You have access, exactly like a gold bar or a piece of, or a dollar bill, right? So that is possible with the blockchain, and that's why, we're so excited about it, I guess.
Absolutely excited. Jackie, what are the most transformative use cases that are working well today in Web3?
Yes, that's a great question. So I think, within Web3, there's a lot more use cases with ownership. We start off with DeFi, then you go down the road of NFTs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which are DAOs, as well as GameFi. And what I want to leave the audience with and how this all ties in is the blockchain. It's a public ledger, and everything on the blockchain is immutable. It has transparency, has security, so transactions cannot be undone. So DeFi is my first example of, transparency on the blockchain. Every single person has access to their own keys. This is without an intermediate like a bank. And through smart contracts and through the blockchain, users are able to, lend, borrow, and actually earn yield on their native assets. Some of the platforms, I don't know how familiar the audience is with it, but Aave, Compound, just to name a few. Whereas with fintech platforms, typically you'd go through a long KYC process as well as proof of history or proof of credit. Whereas Web3, anyone that has access to the internet or a cryptocurrency wallet can access it, whether that's through a smartphone or a computer. And then the next case is NFTs. The first iteration of NFTs, many of you guys can think of it as digital collectibles. Now there's a lot more use cases. It kind of gets a bad rap, whether that's loyalty programs, it could be on-chain verifiable credentials, it could be proof of ownership. So I think NFTs are a big landscape improving ownership. We saw a lot of these GameFi platforms, whether it was Splinterlands, Axie Infinity, Decentraland, Sandbox, where they allowed users through NFTs to borrow and actually earn yield on their assets. So those are the main things. Then the last thing I'll leave you guys with is, decentralized autonomous organizations, where centralized entities typically have all the power. It gives more power back to the community. So through fractions of ownership, you have a say within the community, and this is all trackable on the blockchain.
Awesome. Thank you. Now to John. How do you see Web3 changing the way big companies behave towards consumers?
I'm going with Jeff. And I actually don't know. And the reason is because big companies already hold our data, right? They don't have a decentralized ledger, they just have a ledger, right? And so there's very little incentive for a big company to change the way that they do things, right? Like they already own the data, they hold the data, they are the data, they monetize our data, right? Look at all the business models that are just based on monetizing our data, right? So what blockchain, the power of blockchain, or the promise of blockchain, is people owning their own data, people owning their own assets, people being able to transfer them between one another without the big intermediary. And so I don't see big companies adopting and all of a sudden saying, you know what, I'm gonna make my ledgers decentralized. I'm gonna give up all the power that I have to the people. I'm gonna start giving the money back to the people. I just don't see it. I think that the only way that happens is if we all start using technologies and use cases that make them move, right? That where they start to lose market share, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna have to give some power back to the people that use my services, so that I can keep them as customers. And I think that's the. So I don't really know how big companies are gonna do it.
Absolutely. And finally, Guille, how do you see Web3 technologies enabling evolution in Central America and LATAM?
Okay, so all of you probably are interested in the topic. That's why you came here. So you've probably read a little bit about this. What I would like to share is imagine that all of you can be able to telepathically talk to each other. Okay, that sounds a little bit crazy. But why do I want to make that example? Imagine that you communicated telepathically only to one person. That is sort of the centralized version of this. And so you're telepathically connecting to only one. Imagine the power you're giving to that thing. And that thing can then go back and speak to everybody depending on what they think is going to maximize profit. And so I understand why there is this idea of how is this going to evolve. But the reality is you are in Guatemala or in Central America, somebody stops you, you walk out to the car, it's the police, and you're like, oh, what do they want? They're gonna ask for my ID. Oh dear, okay. So you get out your ID and you're scared. Why? Because of security, because of, you know, you're gonna lose a little bit of your safety or identity. Why? Because you're revealing to somebody else something about you. And when you have technologies like Web3, this is people imagining scenarios where you show people only what you need to show in order to generate the trust you need to show for that particular transaction. So if you are asked, can you drive the car? I will only show you that I am an actual valid driver. That's it. You don't need to know my name. You don't need to know where I live. So when you live in places where rule of law is not necessarily as good as other places, this is essential for our evolution. And I just want to leave another comment, which is, okay, so why do big companies get to do things like this, right? So you work for a big company, Guillermo. Okay, so I want to share that if you start thinking of abundance and how you are part of abundance, then it makes sense. Because when you create these networks, you are part of the creation of that network. And as that network gets larger, you are, even if it's a little piece of it, you are the one doing it. And so it then becomes global, or it then becomes Central American. So if you think it's the normal way of looking at business, it is not. And so why would companies want to get interested in understanding this? Because the applications of this done well is crazy, the amount of value you unleash. Now, people need to understand that you need to come from a place of having no fear. Because when corporations that have already accumulated wealth in a particular way, they might be fearful of stepping into a new idea that is not into their comfort zone. So the first thing you need to do is get a wallet, start playing around, be careful, because NFTs and places like this is a wild west yet. But if you're careful and you don't do crazy things, and you really learn, then it's an amazing future.
Thank you, Guille. And now we want to go to the most important part of our panel, which is the question and answer from you guys. Can someone pass the mics, or do we have to use these mics for the audience as well? Thanks. You can ask the questions to a particular panel member or to any one of them. To all. I don't know. No worries, yeah, I can hear you.
Hello? Yes. So it's for everybody. And it's about the trusted third parties, right? Because you mentioned a lot about not having intermediaries and all that. So these third parties of trust, let's talk about the deed of a house. Let's talk about some financial product that you have out there. They have value because of this third party of trust. Let's say my government. I'm the owner of my house because my government says that I'm the owner of the house. If that changes, I'm no longer the owner of the house. So how do you see in the future, are these third parties of trust are going to still be there, but they'll need to adapt, or they'll be substituted? If they'll be substituted, by what, or how, what's your opinion on that future?
Anyone want to take a stab at it?
Maybe I can just kick it off, but I think, decentralization gives you the opportunity to be, let's say, autonomously in charge of your assets, your information, right? So you don't need to trust anybody else. That's the power of decentralization. Although, you don't necessarily need to be so radical. And so, that power comes with some sort of responsibilities. For example, if you are the custodian of your own money because you don't want to use banks, you can, but what happens if you lose your keys, for example? There is nobody you can blame, or there is nobody that can actually help you, right? It's on you. So that is a cool feature, but it's also, again, it adds a lot of risk and responsibility. So there are people that actually trust third parties more than what they trust themselves. There are people that even if they can, do self-custody of their money, they might choose to depend on somebody else to, assign that responsibility to somebody else and give them the trust, right? So one thing is to be able to do that, but the other thing is that you don't really have to do it. It's gonna be a case-by-case situation. The cool thing is that now we have that option for those who prefer to do that, right? So.
Maybe I just want to share, mathematics is involved in all of this, right? So if the blockchain was built in a way that you don't need that third party. Now, we need each other because it's decentralized. But coming to your point, that's the part of the responsibility. So now there are a lot of companies that are actually looking into this and saying, well, I can be your custodian, and maybe people will trust that, and that's fine. But you're not having the full-blown experience, let's say, and there are other ideas evolving around how to, if you lost your key, well, many other people in the network might know me. So there are ways of this that is evolving.
More questions, please.
So we have a great lineup of investors here, and nice to see some of you again. And just a quick question on application layer 10 to 100x improvements on the way things are currently done in Central America. What are the opportunities you're looking at from an investment perspective that you say, this is a type of allocation that we'd want to make, these are the problems that we see in Central America, and what is the gap there? What are the sort of app layer things that we're missing right now that would drastically change the way that X works in Central America?
It's probably not a question for me because we don't do too much investing in Latin. That's why we're at this conference.
I mean, now I'm on the spot. Like, guys, come on. This was supposed to be a team effort, right? What's going on? Look, now I think, there's a lot going on, right, in Web3 from an innovation perspective. And we look at startups from all over the world trying to solve all type of problems, right? So you kind of like have opposite, scenarios, like infrastructure type of projects, meaning startups that are trying to still build, the technology to be able to use the blockchain, and then there are startups that are trying to build solution leveraging the blockchain. And it's two completely different things, especially from an investment perspective, right? I personally think that for emerging markets from Central America and other similar realities, I think that the technology is already mature enough to actually be used in, tangible applications that can actually bring tangible value to the people, right? So for example, things like, financial inclusion, for example, right? Well, the blockchain has already been used in maybe proof of cases. Maybe there are not like a lot of success stories out there, but it's clear that it can be a really powerful tool to let's say, to solve as much as possible the problem of, the lack of financial inclusion, right? So that's, I think, what I would be excited about, like to see more tangible application with real use, real value propositions, and and the blockchain is just a way to get there, but the most important thing is to create impact and generate real value, and I think that, the maturity of the blockchain already allows us to do that, and so that's what I think.
I'll just add quickly, So I look for things that take away the drudgery associated with doing blockchain. So things that simplify the technologies that can open up for mass adoption, whatever that is. It's not about the next billion people coming online, but it's finding the tooling so that people who are doing business today use this as a core technology to solve their issues. What those solutions are, we know them when we see them. And this is our invitation to you, since we're out of time, that after this session, we're going to be hosting a private session outside. And if any of you would like to have your questions answered directly, or too shy to ask publicly, we're here to hang out. We're going to have a little private salon about Web3 outside. Thank you all of you for your time. We greatly appreciate the attention, and we look forward to hearing about future successes in Web3. And give a round of applause to my panel, please.